Alright, once again another Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile. I haven't done one of these for a while, ever since pretty much Agnister, and this deck hasn't been updated for a long time, ever since the last wave with Machinix. And now we got more DDD support, with the cover card being Doom of Dimension, with a new form of Armageddon fused with Caesar Alexander and Temujin, because I find DDDs awesome, and I had the deck ever since Arc 5 with the introduction of DDDs, and I'm really glad they really did this with more emphasis with the Doom King, considering that the Doom King was the main ace monster of the rival that is very underrated. He got evolved forms, but it was only a fusion, synchro, and exceed, and not based on its own pendulum form in the main deck. Also, being the main rival, he's technically the polar opposite of Yuya, which also has a fusion of the 4 dragons, and now, with Doom of Dimensions, we now got a new form that can now face off against Zark, because DDDs is supposed to go up against the Dimension Dragons, and we just got a new form, and I find that very awesome because I'm very happy that they actually did something with the Doom King. It's just so underrated as a main boss monster for an anime character that it just feels underwhelming that they don't give it any support. And now we got a little more Doom King related, so I'm pretty happy. But overall, this is still a pretty combo heavy deck, and a very complex one at that. You basically just have a lot of cards that just connect with each other, and depending on your opening hand, you just play a certain type of combo. And as you can tell, I'm also playing manga variations of boss monsters as well, as mine is a pure DDD deck without any hand traps, because screw playing all the hand traps, and DDD still suffers from the problem of spacing issues. Because with all the new DDD support, kind of hard to put in the cards as it is. I had to take out some of the cards I want to keep in, and even previously, same thing. Because DDDs just have way too many cards, and basically you'd have to play a lot of one-offs in the deck. But anyway, with all that out of the way, let's just begin with the deck profile, with of course, the main deck. So starting off with the Pendulum monsters, all the way at the bottom, from weakest to strongest. So first off, we go with the 3 Keplers. This is still a 3 of. It's a pendulum scale of 10, which helps out with the pendulum summon. Unfortunately, it loses 2 scales every standby phase. But considering that DDD has ways for you to remove it beforehand, it's not entirely too bad, but you mainly use it for the monster effect, where when summoned, you can hard once per turn use one of these effects. Target one other DDD card you control and return it back to the hand, or add a Dark Contract from your deck to your hand, which you're mainly going to do it for the Dark Contract search. The only thing that does kind of suck is that you do have to normal summon this, which was terrible back in the day, but with new Link monsters, this is not really much of a problem as it used to be. But you just run it 3 for the search. And then to continue off, we go to one of the newer cards, Scale Servitor. So this one, during the standby phase, you can target one of your face-up cards on the Pendulum Zone, and you can change its scale to 0. This could be a little helpful with the emphasis on more pendulum summoning now, especially with the new Ragnarok. But being a scale 9 is also very nice because most of your main deck is up to level 8 when it comes to majority of stuff that you're going to pendulum summon anyway. With the main effect, where if you control a DD Pendulum card, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is no more special summon, you can change this card's level to 4, and if this card is sent to the graveyard, or placed to the extra deck face up, you can target one DD Pendulum monster you control and return it to the hand, which could even be your Pendulum scales, and of course each effect's hard once per turn. It has its usefulness, being a scale 9, but also being able to summon itself, also being a level 2 that could become a level 4 just in case, because those are 2 magic levels for this deck, especially 4 where you can go for a rank 4 exceed. So it's just overall a pretty decent useful card just in case you need it. And then a card that got shrunk down is the card Pernicus. Because this one on summon, you can Foolish Burial a DD or Dark Contract card from your deck, which is, of course, used to be very good and very necessary, but considering all the key pieces that you just sent to the graveyard from hand anyway, and you don't have as much graveyard effects, this could be cut down to 1. And also, the Pendulum Scale effect can negate spell damage, which could be very helpful for your Dark Contract negation if you need it, but you mainly use it for the Foolish Burial, but not as important. And then we go to one of the newer cards that is not from Doom of Dimension, and it's still 3 of Griffin. So on the scale, you can target one Fiend monster you control to give it 500 attack for each of your Dark Contracts. You're not going to really use this too often, but then you must destroy this card if you use this effect. But the monster effects is why you really use this. So first off, it can special summon itself from hand, which is huge if you have a DD monster. And then it also has the ability where when normal special summon, you can discard a card from your hand that's either DD or Dark Contract to draw a card. not as necessary, but the third effect is where it's necessary, where when special summon from the graveyard, you can target one DD card from your deck and add to your hand, except itself, of course. Yep, this is basically further extended play while also being a level 4, and it's just overall just more play extension, which is why you just run it. And then another one of Orthoros, not as necessary as it used to be, but being a level 4 tuner really helps, especially for the part where you can target one Dark Contract you control and one other spell and trap your opponent controls and destroy them, which could be very helpful. But you use it for the monster effect where when you take effect damage, which will happen with certain cards, you can special summon this card from your hand, but you're restricted to summoning fiends for the rest of the turn. Like I said, being a card that is level 4 tuner and that can special summon itself is just helpful. And then we go to another one of Extra Surveyor, which has a nice pendulum effect where if your opponent's monster card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one other DD monster that is in your pendulum scale and banish it along with this one, and then you can make 2 attacks during the battle phase this turn. Considering that your big monsters are big beaters, having 2 attacks for them is pretty nasty. But the main monster effect is that you can discard this card to add one DD pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, which is why you kind of want to use this card just for more recycling, and it also includes another resource in your graveyard, so that's why I kind of like this card. In which if this card is banished, you can banish the top card of your opponent's deck equal to the number of pendulum monsters from your extra deck. Then you can also target one monster you control that is DD and it gets plus 300 attack for every card banished, which could also be nasty considering that you are technically going to be stacking quite a bunch. But it's basically here for just more recycling while also basically kind of another fusion material that can be used from the graveyard. So it's just overall a nice card, but you mainly use it for the recycling. And then a card that I'm tempted to take out, the Savant Newton, mainly because I use this for the pendulum scale of 10, but you don't really need 10, you just need to go up to 9 realistically, or go with 11 or 13, which speaking of 13, we do have a new 13. So just like the Copernicus, this one negates the trap damages on the pendulum effect, and it has its own useful monster effect, which is why I still kind of ran this because I had space, is that you can discard this card to target one DD or Dark Contract from your graveyard, except itself and add it to your hand, which is of course hard once per turn, and it could be helpful for some more graveyard recycling, even though you're going to end up using your graveyard more so than your extra deck anyway. But it's here if you need it. And then we go to Count Salvador, which is a level 8, which is very helpful, and also has a neat monster effect where you can discard one other card that is DD and special summon this card from your hand. And then if this card is normal special summon, you can add one DD that is 0 attack and defense from your deck to your hand. AKA the Kepler is the main one that you want to search for. But you do also have other 0 attack options technically, but this is here for more searching while also being a level 8, which is actually helpful for some Exceed plays, or in this case now more so Link plays. And it's also nice that it can special summon itself while also setting up the graveyard technically, which is why I run this. But its pendulum effect is that once per turn, if you special summon a DDD monster, you can target up to 3 monsters your opponent controls with the same attribute or type from each other, tribute 2 of them, and then the third one gets attack equal to the total attack of the tribute monster. This scale effect could technically be, say, Kaiju 2 of your opponent's monster to give one of your opponent's monsters a buff. In a way, it is technically removal, but it does keep your opponent of one monster being a buff, but you could always tribute those nasty ones to one that you don't really care about. So it is here for extra removal while also basically extra search, which is why I kind of like this card. And into some of the bigger boss monsters, since now we're going to DDD, we first start off with Oblivion King Abyss Ragnarok. You could technically cut this down to 1, originally this was a 3 of, but now with all the extra effects, you don't really need to run 3 of, especially for the first effect, which is the Pendulum effect, where if you special summon a DD monster, except during damage step, you can special summon an additional DD monster from your graveyard. But any damage that your opponent takes during the turn is half, which does kind of suck sometimes, especially since you could technically OTK your opponent at the same turn. And also, you take 1,000 points of damage as well, so just keep that one in mind. But the monster effect is also very useful because when it's summoned by normal or special summon, you can target one of your DDD monsters. Keep in mind it has to have at least 3 Ds and special summon it. And of course this effect is hard once per turn. And then the other effect is that you can tribute one other DD monster you control, target one of your opponent's face-up monsters and banish it. Nice that you could do some extra banishing and technically could set up the graveyard, but you're not really using it for that effect. You're using it for the special summon, basically. And this is technically also a good scale target for your Link monsters. And then another good old card, Vice King Requiem, which on the Pendulum scale, you can target any number of Dark Constructs you control to special summon this card from the Pendulum Zone, and then increase or decrease level by 1 for each of the Dark Constructs you destroyed. Very nice that you can manipulate its level as well, especially that it's a 2800 beat stick, which could be summoned from the Pendulum Zone and beat your opponent with if you wish. But if you destroy 2 contracts, it'll become a level 6 if you want to shrink it, and you're more likely going to shrink it because you do have a rank 6 for the deck. But its monster effect is also very useful because while you're restricted to only summoning DDDs, a DDD monster that uses this card as material that is either a Fusion, Synchro, Exceed, or Link gets this effect. You can target 1 card on the field and shuffle 1 Dark Contract from your hand or graveyard back to the deck, and if you do, destroy that target, and then you get 1000 life for each one. Which is a pretty nice additional effect because you could recycle your Dark Contracts while also getting 1000 life, while also destroying one of your opponent's cards, or even your own card if you need to. So it's just overall pretty nice just for more summoning and more extensive play. And then to the new boss monster that is basically the character's mom, it's the Queen Machinix. And yes, this is the first DDD in the title in the English side that has Queen instead of the King, even though there should have been some that says Queen instead. And it also has Zero, which is technically more manga related. But a main deck Pendulum monster on a chair again, which also has pretty nasty effects. Because during the main phase, if this card was activated during the turn, you can place 1 Dark Contract, continuous spell, or trap from your deck to face up to your spell and trap zone. Basically, when put to the Pendulum scale, activate a Dark Contract from your deck. Very huge right there, and this card is already very good for that. But it also has a pretty good monster effect where if a face-up DDD and or Dark Contract you control, except itself, would be destroyed while this card is face-up in the extra deck, even during the damage step, you can special summon this card, then destroy 1 card on the field. And if this card in the monster zone is destroyed, you can put this card to the Pendulum Zone. This is just very good for more extensive play, basically. All these boss monsters in the main deck, basically more extensive plays, that's DDD in a nutshell. But it's very nice that you can do more searching, and it's another beater that you can summon, and also being a level 8 really helps out as well. And now to the really big boss monsters that are actually beaters. The main ace of the main rival of Arc 5, the Armageddon. As you can even tell from the playmat, it's part of the 4. So this one, you can target one of the DDD monsters you control, it gets an 800 attack into the end turn, even if this card leaves the field. And also once per turn, when a monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one of your monsters and it gets attack equal to the destroyed monster. But this card cannot attack directly during the turn you play this effect, and also cannot be destroyed by spells or traps that do not target the card. So it has a small little protection, doesn't really do much, honestly, but it's also a big beater on its own, but I mainly use it just for anime reasons because I really like Armageddon, so I just have to run at least the 1 copy of. And also your new Arc Crisis also relates to Armageddon as well, so I just decided to run this. And it's also a nice 3k beater, which is also very nice. That could become an even bigger beater if one of your other stuff is destroyed, because that can happen. And then to Laplace, this one is actually pretty good, and I think this is a good worth run tech card. But not for the Pendulum effect, but even though the Pendulum effect is still pretty good, because during the main phase you can add 1 face-up DDD monster from your extra deck to your hand, except itself. Too bad it has to be DDD and not DD, but oh well. But the main monster effect is that you can special summon this card from your hand by triggering 1 DDD monster, which will trigger more special summon effects. But it's also very nice that any battle damage that you take from this card will become 0. And also it cannot be destroyed by battle, which is another huge thing because, once again, 0. But the big part is that during damage calculation that this card battles the opponent's monster, you can have this card get attack equal to that monster's attack times 2. Yeah, basically, it has a Clear Vice Dragon-like effect where you attack your opponent's monster that has 1000, well, this becomes 2000. That's actually pretty good just to run over anything practically. That's why I love this card. And it's not too hard to summon. It's just too bad the gaining attack point effect is only once per turn. So if your opponent does attack it with a weaker monster first, yes, this card won't be destroyed and you take no damage. And also that monster will more likely to be destroyed. Your opponent can always attack this card with a stronger one, but then this won't be destroyed and you take no damage, and then your opponent will have to attack it again. But overall, it's a very nice card to basically run some monsters over just in case you need it, because that has happened before. And then to Reiji's God card in the manga, which is basically himself, Zero King Reiji, and the pun of Go DDD, which is supposed to be God. But anyway, any effect damage that you take becomes 0, and if you will normal summon a level 5 or higher DD monster, you can do it without tributing, which is very nice. This is basically the manga style of summoning your bigger main deck monsters. It also has its own unique monster effects where when this card would declare attack, if your opponent's life points are 4,000 or less, you can make this card attack equal to your opponent's life. And then it has this additional ability where it cannot be destroyed by battle, and also you take no damage involving this card because of the 0 reasons. And then it has the last effect where you can tribute one monster and then activate one of these effects. So this card can attack directly, which could actually be nasty if your opponent has 4,000 or less life. Your opponent cannot activate card effects in the spell and trap zone, or your opponent cannot activate effects from the graveyard. Overall, it just has its own unique uses as a big boss monster that just basically stops your opponent from doing stuff, and I just like to run it because it's DDDs and I like to have all my boss monsters. While also being a pendulum scale and having a pretty unique effect, and because my deck focuses more on the high level main deck, I do kind of like to have it. In which finally we go to the ultimate DDD in the manga, DDDD, and I think the 4th D stands for deity, Super Dimensional Sovereign Emperor's Hero Paradox, which also has a scale of 10 and does have a weird pendulum effect where you can target one of your opponent's card in the pendulum zone and special summon this card, and if you do, place that card into the pendulum zone but destroy it at the end phase of the next turn, which is just more here for the special summon. But the main effect is that first, it cannot be normal summon, and it can only be special summoned by its own effect, which is basically overscaling pendulum, which was a unique mechanic introduced in the manga that was not shown in the anime, because basically when you perform a pendulum summon, which your total levels are higher than the total scales, you can summon the card, which is actually doable in this deck considering that you do have quite a bit of high level boss monsters. And then when this card is special summoned, you can destroy as many other cards on the field, which is actually a very big nuke, but considering that you need to summon at least probably 2 or 3 monsters just for the nuke, it could be a little hindrance sometimes, but you do have some use, especially with the part where once per turn, if your other DDD monster is destroyed by a spell or effect, you can have this card get additional 3,000 attack. So on summon, it basically nukes and also becomes a 6k beater if you destroy the DDD monster, which can likely happen with this card. I just like to use it just for more anime reasons, or in this case manga reasons, and also being a pendulum scale of 10, which is also another one, big boss monster as well. And that's it for the pendulum monsters, which has a lot of effects. To the regular monsters, we start off with Defense Soldier, which you can activate one of these effects. Target one DD monster card in your pendulum zone and special summon it, which is always very helpful. Or banish one of your DD monsters from your graveyard. If your DDD monster attacks this turn, your opponent cannot activate cards during the damage step, which could be quite nasty. And you could also banish this card from the graveyard and add one DD pendulum monster face up from your extra deck or graveyard back to your hand, which is also very helpful. Basically just more extensive play, just like all your other DD main deck monsters that are small. And it's also nice that you could special summon from your scale, which could be more extensive play right there, and also more recycling, so what's not to love? And then we go to DD Night Howling, where when normal summon, you can target a DD monster you control from your graveyard to special summon. But of course, you're restricted to summoning fiends for the rest of the turn, and also the attack becomes 0. And if the monster is destroyed, you take 1,000 points damage, but that's not going to happen. But I do like this card just for a recovery option, and also it's a 1 monster for getting 2 back, just for an extra deck play. And then we got 2 DD Land Soldier, which is a level 2 tuner by the way, so it's also very helpful for that. And you can target 1 DD monster you control, increase that monster's level up to the number of dark contracts you control, which can be helpful for just more extra deck play. And then if this card's in your graveyard, you can target 1 dark contract you control to destroy it and then special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field. Of course, each effect is hard once per turn, but level 2 tuner that can special summon itself while also destroying your dark contract. Just very helpful. I think it's just worth running at 2 just for more extensive play. And into the part of the original lineup, we got the Swirl Slime and Necro Slime. Swirl Slime you could technically cut down to 1. it fuses itself along with another monster from your hand. Necro Slime banishes itself along with another monster from the graveyard to do a fusion summon. And Swirl Slime also has the additional effect where you can banish it from the graveyard to special summon a DD monster from your hand, which could even be cheating out your big DDD monsters. Used to be one of the main starters, but now not as necessary considering all the cards that you kind of have, especially with the searching. And then finally, DD Lamia. Use it for a level 1 tuner that can also special summon itself from hand or graveyard by sending a DD or Dark Contract card from your hand or face up on the field to the graveyard. Of course, hard once per turn, but you just mainly do it for it being able to special summon itself for a level 1 tuner. And that's it for the monster lineup. To the spells. With Dark Contract at the gate, every Dark Contract has this effect where you get penalized during the standby phase, and in this case you take 1,000 points of damage. And it lets you search for a DD card once per turn in a hard once per turn way, and it's during the main phase. Obviously, further searching, you must run 3. And then you use Swamp King for your fusion summon, because during the main phase you can fusion summon from your hand and or graveyard by banishing the materials from the graveyard, but if you use it from hand, you send them to the graveyard. And you can do and or, so you could banish one from the graveyard and use one from your hand to send to the graveyard. So there's that as well. And also it can go for your bigger DDDs, which is why I run it. And then we go to one of the manga related cards, will be Dark Contract of the Zero King. Because I'm using more of the main deck boss monsters, I decided to run 2 of these. But basically what it does is that it's also treated as a DD card, which is for some reason on a spell, but kind of does matter in a way. But the effect is that you can target one DD card you control, except itself, to destroy it. If you do, special summon one DD monster from your deck. And then for the rest of the turn, you are restricted to summoning only DD monsters. And of course, this is hard once per turn. This is basically just letting you cheat out your bigger boss monsters by destroying one of your smaller ones, or replacing one of the monsters that you don't want for a bigger one. That's basically what it is, and considering that I'm running more of the Zero King or Manga boss monster lineup from the main deck, I decided to run 2 of these. And I do kind of like summoning those big ass boss monsters as well. And then finally, Dark Contract with the Patient License, which is a field spell Dark Contract, not a continuous spell, surprisingly. And its effect is a bit nasty because it literally can lock your opponent, where if your opponent special summons a monster with the same card type as one of the ones that you have, that is DDD, Fusion, Synchro, Exceed, or Link, except during damage step, you inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent. Also, while this card is face up on the field, your opponent cannot special summon any monster related to that same card type for the rest of the turn. Basically, if there's a matching monster type that is on your field and your opponent decides to summon it, not only your opponent gets burned, but your opponent is locked from summoning that type of monster for the rest of the turn unless they destroy this card. But if they do decide to get rid of this card, it has this last effect where if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one DD monster from your graveyard or face up from your extra deck that is a pendulum monster and add to your hand. And it's actually one of those Dark Contracts that does not have a penalty to it, which is also very nice. But if anything, this is more of a tech card if you want to run it. I do like to lock down my opponent as well, hence why I decided to run this. But it's not the most necessary card to search, but considering all the searching that you have, it's not too hard to search this just in case you want to use it. And then finally to the only trap, I am just testing this out so far, is Dark Contract of the Different Dimension. So your penalty is 1,000 life during the standby phase, and during each turn you can activate each of these following effects. You can shuffle 2 Dark Contracts from your graveyard back to the deck, then target one card your opponent controls or in the graveyard and banish it. And if this card is destroyed, you get 500 life. Then if it's destroyed by your opponent's card effect, additional 500 life. It's here just for some extra recycling if you need it. I'm not going to say that you're likely to always have those Dark Contracts in the graveyard, but considering all the Dark Contract destruction that you have, I think it is kind of worth running, especially since, yes, you can end up recycling them back to your hand, but sometimes it's not too fast enough that you kind of actually want more ways to just shuffle them back. And also it's life point recovery. And so that's it for the main deck. Now for the extra deck. Starting off with the Link Monster of Gilgamesh. The first Link monster, by the way. So if this card is special summon, you can activate this effect, where you can not special summon anything else but DDs for the rest of the turn. but you also put 2 pendulum monsters from your deck into the pendulum scale and you take 1,000 points of damage. Basically, it sets up your pendulum scales for your pendulum summon or your pendulum effects, which is why you run this card. And it's one of your starter plays anyway, so you just have to use it. With the second effect, where it's not really too relevant, where if this card would be destroyed by your opponent, either by battle or by card effect, you can special summon 1 DDD monster from your extra deck or graveyard in defense, except itself. And of course, each effect is hard once per turn. Mainly for the pendulum scale setup, this is why you really use it. And it's also nice that the pendulum scale setup is not really required with a link summon. You could even summon this from the graveyard and then just put your scales right there. And then to continue off to a new Link monster, Sky King Zeus Ragnarok, which has a scale of 3 and requires at least 2 DD monsters. You can target 1 DD or Dark Contracts you control and destroy it. And then during the turn, during the main phase, you can do 1 additional Pendulum Summon, which is very huge because you could always do the first Pendulum Summon, which is going to be a batch of monsters, and then do another one, which is 3 more monsters since you have 3 more arrows. And it also has a nice second effect where when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can banish 1 DD monster or Dark Contract from your graveyard to negate the activation and destroy it. You mainly use it for the more extensive Pendulum Summon because that itself is kind of ridiculous. And I am thinking about running a second copy of this, but due to spacing reasons and all the monsters I want to use, this is so far just a one-of, especially since usually you just want to do it for your beginning turn plays. And now to the Exceed monsters, starting with the new card of Wise King Solomon. So it's 2 level 4 DD monsters, and it has the effect where you can detach 1 material to add 1 DD monster from your deck to your hand. And if this card becomes banished, you can target 1 DD effect monster you control, and it gets this effect into the end turn. When this card destroys the opponent's monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's attack. This is basically here for more extended searching, but the extra banish effect is basically a new set of DDD monsters where when banished you get a certain effect, and that extra banishing is a new type of DDD monster wave where you basically kind of just use them as a material for your other summons. But that's basically what it is, just more extensive play of searching and then just extending your monster by giving it more effects. And then we go to the Wave King Caesar, which you can just use this for mainly rank 4 reasons, and you might even just decide to take it out, which I am considering. But it's also a 24k beater, and it's one of the original ones, so I just want to run it. So you can detach 1 Exceed material, and then at the end of the battle phase, all monsters that were destroyed this turn get special summoned back, but you take 1,000 points of damage for each one during the end phase of the turn. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 Dark Contract from your deck and add it to your hand, which is the main reason why you kind of run this is for the further searching, and also being a rank 4 Exceed that is just easy to summon. And also it's a different name to Solomon, which is another reason why you kind of just have to run another rank 4 Exceed, because rank 4 Exceed has got prominence for this deck recently. And then to evolve the Wave King to the High King, which practically has the same effect where even when sent to the graveyard, add a Dark Contract, and it's also rank 6, but with more level 6, it's actually easier to summon. But the main effect where when your opponent activates a spell or trap or a monster effect that would special summon a monster, you can detach a material and negate that effect, and then this monster along with another monster gets 1800 attack. And it's not hard once per turn, which is also very nice. So basically it's kind of like a solemn effect with an extra power boost. That's why I kind of like to run this card, as this is one of your end board boss monsters that you want to have in. And then to the big boss monster, for the Exceed lineup is the Darkness Armageddon, which gives all your pendulum monsters they cannot be destroyed by card effect cost, which is also very nice. And on summon, you can target 1 face-up pendulum card from your extra deck to put it as a material, which recently has a little more prominence. And also, you can detach 1 material to target equal to the number of pendulum monsters you control to your opponent and destroy them. So if you have 3 pendulum monsters, destroy 3 cards your opponent controls. It has to be exact, unfortunately, but it's a 35k body that has protection for all your pendulum monsters, which is actually pretty nice. And it's a nice beater as well, with the final effect that since it's a pendulum Exceed, if destroyed, it goes to the pendulum scale if you can, and also has the pendulum effect where if you have another DD monster in the pendulum zone, you can special summon 1 DDD Exceed monster from your extra deck, except itself. You could even summon your Caesars with this and then just use them as material, but you're not going to really use it for that. You mainly use it for the main monster effect. And then to the last Exceed monster, which is one of the newer ones, which is Machinix. This is from the big upgrade that we got from last time, and this one was a very huge one, considering the fact that you can also exceed summon this card by using a DDD monster you control. It doesn't even have to be an exceed monster. It could be any DDD monster, which will trigger more effects because it's just further special summon. And it also has a nice effect where you can either detach 2 materials, which is usually not going to happen, or destroy 1 dark construct you control to negate one of your opponent's monster effects when activation, which is kind of nice right there, but you mainly use it just for the more further extensive special summon. And also because it's a Exceed Pendulum, if it gets destroyed, it goes to the Pendulum Zone, in which the Pendulum effect is also pretty decent, because while in the Pendulum Zone, you can target one other Pendulum monster you control or in the graveyard and special summon it if the card is in the Pendulum Zone. But it goes to the Pendulum Zone if the card is from the graveyard. So it's also nice that it's a Pendulum scale of 10 that can special summon itself, also has a negate, so it could be an end board boss monster, and just basically sets you up even further as a Pendulum scale, just does a lot of things. And now to the Synchro lineup, starting with the Clovis, a Synchro guy with a chair, the first one, and we still do not have that many big boss monsters when it comes to Synchros. So it has this generic summoning condition and has the part where when Synchro summon you can target one of your banished DD monsters and special summon it, but if there's a dark construct in the field, you can target one from the graveyard instead. Just nice for more extensive play, and it's level 6, which is also very nice as it could make you go to Easy Caesar or just go further Synchro or whatever place that you want. But also has the additional part, like the new set, where when this card is banished, you can activate this effect. DD monsters that attack defense position monsters now do piercing, which is pretty nasty on its own considering that DDDs is filled with a bunch of boss monsters, especially if you're summoning Armageddons or the Arc Crisis. But once again, extra deck that just further extends your play to just do more plays, and of course has the additional ability when used as material practically. And then we of course have to run Alexander, because Alexander, if another DD monster is no more special summon, you can special summon a level 4 or lower DD monster, which being level 7 is also very helpful with its level, and once again it's further extending play, so you just have to kind of run it, and I like it for its original big DDD lineup. And then we go to Siegfried, being the only level 8 DDD Synchro, which is unfortunate, but has the ability where during either player's turn, you can target one face-up spell or trap on your opponent's field and negate it until the next standby phase, which if your opponent activates a card, yes, you could just straight up negate it. So that's also very huge. In which if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can gain 1000 life for every dark contract you control. Not as a relevant effect these days, considering that you might be destroying your own dark contracts beforehand, but mainly for the negate, of course, and it's also being a level 8, and it's a bigger Synchro that you can summon. And then I have to unfortunately skip the High King Alexander, despite me wanting to run it. So I'm using the Whitest Armageddon, which gives all your pendulums protection of cannot be targeted by card effects. And also has a weird effect once again, which is probably going to make me take this card out, but because they're all Armageddons, I kind of want it. When a monster is summoned, your opponent can target one of the pendulum monsters you control, and that's the weird part. All other monster effects they control are negated except for that one targeted monster. So against pendulum monsters, this is perfect. But against non-pendulums, it kind of sucks because yes, it makes your opponent need to choose which monster effect they want to activate during the whole turn, and it just repeats every time a summon happens. And just like the other Pendulum extra decks, what destroyed goes to the Pendulum Zone and has a pretty nice Pendulum effect where once per turn, when your opponent's monster would declare attack, you can target one DDD Synchro monster you control. Destroy as many monsters your opponent controls equal or less than the defense of that monster that you targeted. But additionally, inflict your opponent 1000 points of damage for each monster that was destroyed by the Pendulum effect. This was kind of nice when you were targeting Alexander with the 6000 attack. But I just kind of like to run this because Armageddon for anime reasons, and I might actually run back the Alexander for this reason as well. So yeah, I just kind of want to run everything, but unfortunately you can't. And now for the fusion lineup, which has shrunk down over the years, starting with Temujin or Genghis, one of your main original lineup. So when this card is destroyed by your opponent, you can target one dark hunter from your graveyard and add it back to your hand, but you're not using it for that effect. You're using it for this effect where when a monster is special summoned, that is DD, you can special summon one DD monster from your graveyard. And it could be any type of DD monster, which is also very huge because that just means that even your big boss monsters can come back. But this is one of your starter monsters, which used to be a 2-of, but now it's a 1-of, so it's just basically here to do your plays while also being a level 6. In which we evolve it into the High King, which also has the same effect of letting you do the additional special summon, but also has this new effect instead of recycling the Dark Contract, where once per turn you can target a spell or trap or card effect as a quick effect to negate that card. So just like Siegfried, you negate a face-up card your opponent controls as a quick effect, and it's into the next standby phase, which is pretty nice, while also retaining the special summon effect, and also it's a level 8, which is also very huge for your Exceed plays. And then finally to the Fusion Armageddon, the purplish Armageddon. So the Pendulum effect, during damage calculation, if you have a DDD fusion monster that battles your opponent's monster, you can make that monster lose 1,000 attack into the end turn, even if this card leaves the field. Considering that you do have your big fusion monster now, this might be a little more useful. And also for Armageddon reasons, I decided to run this. And it's pretty good to summon because it requires 2 DDD monsters, but it has a pretty good monster effect where once per turn you can target one of your opponent's monsters and destroy it, and your opponent loses life equal to half its attack, which is actually very nice. And then during the damage step, if your opponent's attack point is changed, you can make that monster go back to its original attack, which means any power buff monsters that go above yours could just have it back to normal, which is also very huge because not a lot of monsters can go above 3,500 attack, especially in their base power. Most of the time they need a power buff, so just being able to negate that is pretty nice. And just like other extra deck pendulums, they go to the extra deck if being destroyed. Unfortunately, I lost that one monster effect where pendulum monsters cannot be destroyed by battle, because that would have been nice if they still have that from the anime. And now with all the build up to the ultimate DDD, Dimensional King Arc Crisis, which is a fusion of Armageddon, Caesar, Alexander, and Temujin. You could even look at it based on its artwork. So the reason why I run all those Armageddons for the pendulum effect, where you can target any number of Dark Contracts you control and destroy them, and then special summon as many Doom King pendulum monsters from your deck and extra deck to your field. And it doesn't have to be face up from your extra deck, even if it's face down from your extra deck. So that part is very huge because you could literally just summon all 3 of your big Armageddons. And then it has the monster effect. So first off, it requires 4 Fiends, that is a Fusion, Synchro, Exceed, and Pendulum, which is basically the polar opposite of going up against Zark. But luckily, unlike Zark, this one can be summoned by banishing the above materials from your field and or graveyard, instead of using one of your Magician Pendulum monsters to basically summon out your big monster. And you can only summon Arc Crisis once per turn, and when this card is special summoned, negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent controls. Yep, just straight up overwhelm your opponent by negating everything on summon. That is pretty strong. And also being a 4K beater that can attack all your opponent's monsters once each, which is also very huge. And let's not forget about all those extra effects that you can gain from those banished setup, from the new set of being banished. But also, just like the other Pendulum extra deck monsters, if destroyed, goes to the Pendulum scale, which is also a Pendulum scale 13. And it's a Pendulum scale 13 with a nice Pendulum effect that just literally summons your Armageddons. Overall, it's just a cool new ultimate boss monsters for DDDs. Unfortunately, it doesn't have protection unlike Zark, but considering that it's not too hard to summon and doesn't really require another card other than just setup, this is just overall a good final boss monster to basically kill your opponent with. And so that's it for this deck profile on my new DDD deck, which is basically a pure anime style DDD deck. So it's not meant to be super competitive with all the hand traps. So this is more for fun, as you can tell based on my lineup of running all the Armageddons and trying to even run all the High Kings, but I couldn't. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend, and what other changes would you make? And when it comes to this deck overall, making changes is a bit flexible, but also difficult at the same time, considering that DDDs has so many different options that it's hard to run them all, especially when it comes to the boss monsters. There's just so many different awesome boss monsters that I really want to go full on anime with this, but you can't unfortunately run them all, especially when it comes to the extra deck. But overall, I still think this deck is really fun with all the combos you can do, and it's kind of fun to always come up with a puzzle basically, because this deck is absurdly combo heavy with basically from A all the way to maybe G, because 5 cards can literally make maybe a 6 monster board. but you kind of have to figure out the little combo of which card goes with which is kind of insane when it comes to DDDs, and I also love DDDs for its design, especially since now we got the Arc Crisis, which is a fusion of the original lineup of Reiji's Ace monsters. And I'm really glad they made it too, because it's a polar opposite to Zark, and it's also Doom King related, which I'm also very happy about because Doom King as a boss monster is just so underrated in comparison to many other boss monsters. In my opinion, probably even more underrated than Borlo Dragon when it comes to rival aces. Because Armageddon didn't even get its evolved form until the last duel, which is basically these three. And I really wish that we got an overscale pendulum or evolved form from the main deck just like how Yuya did, but unfortunately we never got that. And considering that we got a set called Doom of Dimension, I was really expecting more Doom King related stuff, which we did end up getting, but not in the most expected way. But I'm still very happy about it because it's a polar opposite to Zark. It's an integration monster fused with his original lineup, which is why I really love it. It was something I wasn't completely expecting, but I'm overall happy with it just because it is Doom King related and it's something to go up against Zark. But other than that, there's really not much to say about this other than basically there's so many variations of the deck that you can build, and I chose the anime variation of including all the boss monsters as I can. And even the manga ones, technically. But other than that, that's it for this, and see you all next time.